or they don't have a notion of faith, for instance. And I think that in the early going, I give a definition of religion, a tentative one, and say, look, it doesn't matter too much exactly how I draw the line, because I'm going to be looking both sides of the line in any case. But for me, for my definition of religion, religion involves a social institution where the adherents profess or avow belief in a supernatural agent or agents whose approval is to be sought. Now, there are things which look very much like religions that don't meet that criterion. And I think that's your point is well taken. In a sense, they're like religions, but they're not quite religions. And they do fall under the phenomena that we have to look closely at. But I'd also say that those Eastern religions, which I don't know all that much about, but I have been able to determine that, in effect, every major religion has its Unitarians. There are sophisticated Buddhists and sophisticated Shinto and sophisticated Sikhs and Jain and so forth that, in a sense, don't believe in God. But every man, the unsophisticated believers do. They have a whole panoplies of deities and supernatural agencies that they pray to, that they make sacrifices to. But the point is, it's a good point.
We are animals who have evolved enough intelligence to have a great deal of difficulty accepting death. And with that comes the imperative for afterlife, which gives rise to not only religion, but a lot of pseudoscience and so forth and so on. And I think this is linked to the gentleman's question as well, or his point, in that many religions that don't believe in God or believe in God do
believe in the afterlife, yes.
An afterlife or
yep.
generation of some kind.
You're right, and I talk about it in the book. What question?
Suppose someone claimed they believe in God, but you suspected no, they believed in belief in God.
Yeah.
What kind of questions would you ask them to ascertain the difference?
Well, some people, how would I go about testing somebody who claimed to believe in God when I suspected they just believed in belief in God? I discussed that at some length in the book, and in fact, it's a pretty tricky thing. If you do questionnaires with subtly different questions, you can sometimes bring this out. There's some interesting work on questionnaires that's been done. I've been doing some with my graduate students and postdocs. Our results are not yet sufficiently clear to publish. There's all sorts of fairly devious ways you can get at this, actually. Yes?
Is there a physical place in the brain, a chain of molecules that you pointed to as the source of God?
Is there a place in the brain for God? Well, you know, first of all, a few years ago, Dean Hamer wrote a book called The God Gene. And I discuss it briefly in the book because although I think that book was sort of very simplistic and sort of sensationalistic, he's probably onto something. And it's not so much a place in the brain as a neuromodulator imbalance or balance, which the sort of relative concentration of this, for which there is genetic variation in the human beings, may indeed be, for instance, the sort of thing that would evolve in response to the hypnotizability issue. But first of all, as a materialist, as somebody who spends most of his time working on how the mind sits in the brain, yes, there's a place. If we put you in the scanner and asked you to think about Jesus, yes, there'd be a place that lights up. There's also be a place that would light up for jet ski, and Jew, and Jeremiah, and everything else. And they wouldn't be all in alphabetical order either. That's no news. The question is whether there's, as it were, dedicated machinery for deities. I don't think there's any evidence yet that there is, but I think that a more subtle and complicated story about brain differences will soon be. But it's way too early for that. We've got to figure out how you can think about the corner drugstore and hamburgers and the road to Paris before we worry about how you can think about God. Right now, using scanners to study religion is a little bit like trying to figure out how a chess playing computer works by using a voltmeter. I think that'll be the last question, okay? Thanks. Thank you.